Hi everyone, Christina here. Welcome to day one of the 2019 holiday card series. Like years past, I'm going to be sharing 25 card videos with you over this holiday season. So I'm going to be uploading every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 8 a.m. Mountain Time. So if you want to tune in and see the next holiday card video, that is when you can tune in. And if you are not subscribed, you might want to do that now. You can subscribe down below and hit that notification bell. And when you have the notifications on, that means that when I upload a video, you will immediately receive a notification, or you should anyway. And that makes it so you won't miss any of my videos. And I appreciate it when you guys do that. Anyway, today is day one. I have a fun card for you, or actually 4 cards. This card sketch is going to look familiar if you saw my video with Simon's new holiday release a few weeks ago. This was a card I did that I didn't use in that video, but I loved the idea because it was it was simple enough that you could duplicate it multiple times if you have a lot of holiday cards to make, and you can also adapt it to be used with a bunch of different holiday products. So I'm actually going to be doing this card with 4 different ways to have a background, but keeping the card design the same and really simple. I think you guys are really going to love it. So let's get into it, and this is day one of the holiday card series. So here we are. Here is the sketch that I shared with you guys a few weeks ago inside my sketchbook. This uses the Joyful Frame die from Simon Says Stamp, as well as the reindeer background from CZ designer Kathy Zielske. And this card design is very simple and can be adapted to a bunch of different backgrounds. So I'm going to be using 3 different background stamps, as well as an embossing folder to show how you can use this very simple card design. Starting out with my Misty stamp tool, and because I'm going to be using those 3 background stamps, or the 2 background stamps that are cling stamps, I've removed the foam pad inside my Misty and then mounted the reindeer background stamp on the door of my Misty. I'm using some green leaf cardstock from Simon Says Stamp, as well as green leaf ink. This is going to give me a tone-on-tone effect, and this is the exact card design that I envisioned when I drew that card sketch. I was envisioning green on green, and so I decided to go ahead and make this first card exactly as I planned with the card sketch. I walked my fingertips over each area on the background stamp to make sure I got a really good impression. And then when I felt it was pretty good applied down there, I lifted the door and I'm left with this really fun background. So I'm going to set this aside and work on the next background. I'm now using some Schoolhouse Red cardstock from Simon Says Stamp, as well as the Nordic Holiday Bold Prints background stamp from Hero Arts. Now I'm going to be doing some heat embossing on this background, so I'm first prepping it with an anti-static powder tool. This additional powder over the surface of the cardstock will prevent embossing powder from sticking to areas where I don't want it. It will only stick to areas that I've stamped. So I inked up my background stamp with the Versamark ink, and then stamped down onto my cardstock and walked my fingertips over the entire surface area of this background. I then picked up my piece here with some tweezers and applied some gilded embossing powder from Brutus Monroe. I'm actually not using the tweezers quite yet. I'll use that when I get to the heating. So here we are. I've got this fun gold embossing powder, and I'm using my heat tool, and I'm kind of alternating from the front of the cardstock to the back, and going back and forth helps prevent the cardstock from warping too much. And I was actually very surprised how little this cardstock warped, especially for having to heat over the entire area of the cardstock. There were a couple spots where the embossing powder didn't stick, so I used a Versamarker to add a little bit of that ink over those areas, sprinkled on some additional gilded embossing powder, and then heat set that with my heat tool, and that just filled in a few of those little gaps. I'm going to set that aside and work on the third background. I'm now using the Woven Plaid background stamp from Concord and Ninth, and I'm also going to use some Sparrow ink from Simon. So I'm stamping this sort of a little bit of a darker mid-tone brown onto craft cardstock. This is actually Neenah Environmental Desert Storm cardstock. And I'm having a little bit of a tone on tone look with this one, but there's slightly more contrast because the brown is much darker than the cardstock color. So I really love how this one turned out. It has a very worn look to it. And I'm actually going to set this aside and work on my final and fourth background. I'm using the Retro Poinsettia embossing folder from Creative Expressions, as well as some watercolor paper from Strathmore. I'm going to run this through my die cutting machine, and I wanted to show you guys the thickness of the embossing folder as compared to the cutting pad in my Gemini machine. So I'm just going to take out one of those cutting pads, and my embossing folder will act as the thickness for that. So here's my sandwich. I have the cutting pad, the metal shim, the plastic shim, magnetic shim, and then a piece of paper that I usually have there just to protect the magnetic shim. So before I put my watercolor paper in this embossing folder, I'm going to mist it with a little bit of water. This is a distress sprayer from Tim Holtz, and I just misted it a couple times on the front and back of this watercolor paper. By wetting the paper, it softens the fibers and makes it so that when I run this through my die cutting machine, that the paper won't crack. If you don't mist your paper, when you use these really thick embossing folders, sometimes your paper will crack and you don't get the best results. So I discovered that just misting my paper, or watercolor paper in this case, gives me the best results. And this watercolor paper, being thick and kind of cottony, looks absolutely beautiful with that texture. While I have my die cutting machine out, I'm going to do a bunch of additional die cutting. I have the neutral foils pack from Concord and Ninth. I'm going to use one of the gold sheets in here to die cut the joyful frame, and then I'm using some vellum to cut the background square. So I ran that through my die cutting machine 4 times, one for each card, and then I just set those pieces aside. I'm now going to use the A2 layers dies from Waffle Flower to cut out the backgrounds that I've created. I decided not to cut out the embossed background since I didn't want to flatten it when I put it through my die cutting machine. But for the 3 that I stamped, I'm using the 3rd largest frame from that die cut set. And this is going to cut it down so it's the perfect size for an A2 card and leave a little bit of the card base showing in the background. I used a bit of washi tape to hold that in place and then ran that through my die cutting machine. And I did that for all 3 backgrounds. So you'll notice that I just used a little bit of washi tape, and it's mostly on the area outside of what I will be using on the card. I do that so that the washi tape doesn't stick to the areas that I'll be using. So now I'm going to take the 4 vellum squares that I die cut earlier, and I'm going to apply adhesive onto the back of these. And I want the adhesive to be on the entirety of the back. So I'm using my Xyron Creative Station Light. This is a machine that you can crank, and it pulls that through and adds adhesive over every single bit of that embossing, or of that vellum piece. So I'm just running this through and making sure I have all 4. And then I can use the cutting blade on the back of the machine to cut this out of the machine. I'm going to take my fingertips and run it over the surface of these squares to make sure that adhesive is applied to the back of the squares. And then I can peel up this front plastic piece to reveal the vellum squares underneath. I then place each of these onto some additional vellum and pressed it down with my fingertips. Now, I do this because I wanted the vellum to be slightly more opaque. Some of the patterns on my backgrounds are a little bit busy, and I didn't want them to interfere with the letters of the joyful frame. When I assembled each one of these frames, I used small dabs of glue and then dabbed off the entire die cut onto some scratch paper. And that just gets rid of a little bit of that glue so that when I press it down, it's not going to smush out from underneath the die cut. By the way, that glue I'm using is Connect Glue from Gina K Designs. So I place that down onto my vellum square and use my fingertips to press it in place. When it comes to adhering the joyful letters, I use the negative space from the die cutting and place that inside. And that lets me puzzle piece the letters right over the center, and I have perfect placement every single time. The hardest part of this particular technique is removing that negative piece after you've adhered the letters, because sometimes the letters want to come away from the surface just like that negative piece. But in the end, it's completely worth it because then you have those letters in the perfect place. So I just pulled those away. And if you have any letters that start to peel up, you can use some tweezers or a very fine pointed tool just to press them back down onto the vellum. I then used my scissors to trim each of these squares out. This was super easy to do, and since they were just squares, I decided to not cut out additional squares using the die. So now I have 4 greetings to go onto my cards. I'm now prepping the card bases. These are made out of some Neenah Classic Crest Solar White cardstock, and I've scored them at 5.5 to create top folding parts. For each one of these backgrounds, I put foam tape on the back, including that white embossed piece, even though it is the size of the front of the card. I then placed each one of these onto the card fronts, and I took my time to get these centered just right, and then pressed down with my fingertips to make sure they were adhered completely to the card front. So the last thing to do for these is to adhere the greeting joyful squares on top. Now I want adhesive all on the back so that I don't have any adhesive showing. So once again, I use my Xyron Creative Station Light to add adhesive to the back of these vellum pieces. So I'll cut that out of the machine, and then I can peel these up off of that background piece and put them directly onto my card fronts. Now, this adhesive is super strong, so I want to caution you, you want to make sure that your greeting is exactly where you want it, because you won't really be able to peel it up and move it around a little bit. It's not as forgiving as a liquid glue, but the advantage is you don't see any adhesive through the vellum. So I place that on top, and that finishes all 4 cards for today. I want to let you guys know that all of the supplies that I use, including the embossing folder, the background stamps, and the die, are listed down below in the video description in the supply section. So if you want to purchase any supplies to make a card like this, you can use those links down below, or you can use whatever supplies you have on hand. This card adapts to a lot of different supplies. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I love all 4 cards, but I want to know which card is your favorite. Let me know down in the comments below which one you enjoyed the most. I have my favorite. I think my favorite is the white one with the embossing, just because that texture is just so gorgeous and elegant and beautiful. And it would also be one that would be even more easy to replicate than the other 3 cards, because all you have to do is run that through your die cutting machine. Super simple. On screen, I've got 3 more videos for you to check out. These are going to be the 3 previous years of the holiday card series. And if you want to see even more vintage holiday card series, I'm going to have links down below in the video description for all 10 of the past years of the holiday card series, all day 1. Thank you so much for watching today, and I will see you on Monday for day 2 of the holiday card series.